Yes, my dear students, staying at home, you can make a follow-up with me in King Lear. I am going to cover the first scene, and I wrote for you the most important questions you have to pay attention to. There are 6 questions on page 13, 14, 15. So please, would you kindly open your text to page 13? Because you knew before the characters, the main theme, and setting time and place so we can build on what we said before. Lear, king of Britain, had 3 daughters: Goneril, the wife of the Duke of Albany; Regan, wife of the Duke of Cornwall; and Cordelia, the youngest. So through these few lines, we can understand that King Lear was the king of Britain, and he had 3 daughters. The eldest one was Goneril, the second one was Regan, and the youngest one was Cordelia. Goneril was married to the Duke of Cornwall, but Regan was married to the Duke of Albany. Yes, Cordelia was not married. She was still single, but 2 gentlemen wanted to marry her: the King of France and the Duke of Burgundy. And later on, we knew that she married the King of France, and she traveled with him to France, and she became the Queen of France. The King of France and the Duke of Burgundy each wanted Cordelia for his wife. At the time of this story, they were staying at Lear's court. The old king was over 80 years old and tired of government. Okay, please underline with me, because this is the answer of question number 1 on the screen. The old king was over 80 years old and tired of government. Why did King Lear decide to divide his kingdom? Because he was very old. He was over 80 years old and he was tired of government. So he decided to take no further part in state affairs, but to leave younger people to manage it. He called his 3 daughters to him to find out, underline find out equal discover, to find out from their own lips which of them loved him best, so that he could divide his lands and money among them according to the love for him. So I think I answered the question number 2. How did King Lear decide to divide his kingdom? According to his daughter's love to him. Goneril, the eldest one, who was married to the Duke of Albany. She said that, yes, I think I started reading the answer of question number 3 on the screen. How did each daughter express her love to her? And actually we have 3 daughters. Goneril, the oldest, declared equal announced that she loved her father more than words could tell, that he was dearer to her than the light of her own eyes. And for sure, she wasn't honest. She was dishonest. She was a liar. She said these sweet words just to take her share in her father's wealth. Such talk is easy to be pretend, whereas there is no real love. But the king was very pleased to hear it, thinking that her heart went with her words. He gave her and her husband one third of his large kingdom. when he met with Regan, the second daughter, who was as worthless as her sister, announced that the love which she felt for her father was much greater than her sister's. She found all other joys dead compared with the pleasure which she took in the love of her dear king and father. So the second daughter declared that her love to her father is much greater than her sister's love. She meant Goneril, and that she found all other ways or other joys or other pleasure in life dead compared with the pleasure which she took in the love of her dear king and father. Lear felt so happy to have what he thought were such loving children that he gave Regan and her husband another third of his kingdom, equal in size to the share which she had already given to Goneril. Then he went to the younger sister, الأخت الصغرى, Cordelia, whom he called his joy. He asked what she had to say. He thought no doubt that she would please his ears with the same loving speeches as her sister, or even that hers would be stronger than theirs, as he had always been his favorite. But Cordelia was upset by the claims made by her sister, which she knew were only intended to persuade the king to give them part of his country. So she only answered that she loved her father according to her duty. So she said, I love you as a duty, with no more and no less, because he has loved her and he has brought her up. The king was shocked at these words from his favorite child, and asked her to consider, to think again her words carefully, and to improve her speech so that it didn't spoil her fortune. Cordelia then told the king that she loved and obeyed and honored him because he was her father and he had brought her up and loved her. But she could not make such grand speeches as her sisters had done, or promise to love nothing else in the world. Why did her sister have husbands, if, as they said, they had no love for anything except their father? If she ever married, she was sure that her husband would want at least half her love, half her care, and half of her duty. Cordelia really loved her father almost as much as her sister pretended to do. At any other time, she would have told him so in stronger and more loving words. But when she saw how her sister's deceitful words, untrue words, false words had won such surprises, she thought the best thing she could do was to love and be silent. This showed that she loved him, but not for what she could obtain. And her words, simple as they were, had much more truth and sincerity in them than those of her sisters. Old age. The old age of King Lear made Lear so unwise that he could not tell the truth from untruth. So King Lear was unable to distinguish, to differentiate between truth and untruth. Words come from heart and words come from lips. Nor a brightly painted speech from words that came from the heart. He was so angry at Cordelia's plainness of speech, which he called pride. So he accused Cordelia of being proud, that he shared the third part of his kingdom equally between Cordelia's two sisters. So he divided his kingdom into two halves. One half went to Goneril and her husband, and one half went to Regan and her husband. So he deprived Cordelia from her inheritance, from his wealth. He gave her nothing. That he shares a third part of this kingdom equally between Cordelia's two sisters and their husbands, the Dukes of Albany and the Duke of Cornwall. And now called them to him, and in the presence of all his court, he gave them his kingdom to share together with all the powers of government. So he gave them all his possessions, not only the possessions, not only his lands and palaces, but he gave them also the power to rule. He kept only, so please pay attention that Lear kept two things for himself. The title of a king, he kept the title of a king, and he kept 100 soldiers to serve him. He kept only the title of a king for himself. It was agreed that he and the 100 soldiers to serve him should live month by month in each of his daughters' palaces in turn. So he would live a month with Gonil, then he would live another month with Regan. He would live with them month by month in turn. Such an unbelievable, foolish division of his kingdom made more anger, filled all his nobles with shock and sorrow. It means all the nobles, all his lords were shocked because of the decision Lear made to divide his kingdom among his two daughters. But none of them had the courage to act except the Earl of Kent. And we knew in class that the Earl of Kent was the king's best friend and advisor. And I think I'm going to answer question number 4 on the screen. Who refused the division of the kingdom and why? The Earl of Kent refused the division of the kingdom. Why? Because he knew that Lear wasn't wise when he divided his kingdom, when he left power. He was beginning to speak for Cordelia when the angry Lear commanded him to stop, or he would have him put to death. To this, the good Kent paid no attention. He had always been faithful to Lear, whom he had honored as a king, loved as a father. So Kent loved the king as a father and honored him as a king, and followed as a master. He had been ready to give his life in war against the king's enemies, or when the king's safety was in danger. Now that Lear was his own greatest enemy, this faithful servant urged him for Lear's own good. He begged the king to follow his advice, as he had so often done in the past, and to undo what he had so unwisely done. Kent said that he would die rather than let Lear believe that his younger daughter loved him less than her sisters did. As for Lear, the threats, they could not frighten a man whose life was already at the king's service. That should not prevent him from speaking the truth. The honest words of this good Earl of Kent only made the king more angry, like a madman who kills his own doctor. Underline with me. Like a madman who kills his own doctor. What does this sentence mean? It means that King Lear was a madman, was a sick man, and he killed the doctor who was trying to help him, was trying to save him. He ordered his true servant to leave the country and gave him only 5 days. So how did the king threaten him? Him refers to the heir of Kent. He gave him 5 days to leave the country. And if he was found on the 6th day, Lear would put a tragic end to his life. But Earl of Kent didn't leave the king. If on the 6th day he was found within the borders of Britain, he would be put to death. But Kent changed his clothes and dressed as a servant, and changed his name to Chaos to be beside the king, because, as we have just said, he loved the king as a father and honored him as a king, and he was ready to sacrifice his life for the sake of the king. This is the end of today's scene. I wrote 60 questions, and I wrote more than 3 pages, and I covered all the answers on the screen. I wish you the best of luck. Till we meet next time, God be with you. Stay safe.